There we go. Hey family. Hopefully you can hear me, see me, feel me. I'm going to do a few invitations here today. Welcome to the G Spot Live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you everybody who is joining today. So I'm just taking a moment, as I do every week, to invite folks to join us in this space. Sending invitations. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. I'm a little late today. Running a little late today. Feeling quiet kind of in my spirit, but I know when I get cranking here, I'll turn up some more with you. All right, I'm just taking a minute to invite, okay? And I have a little quiz for those of you who are here. And if you can remember what I talked about last week, I talked about 5 key areas of basically how we're predispositioned to listen, to engage. And if you all can remember, I will give a reading to those, to any of those who can. So I'm just taking a minute to do a little invitations here. Okay. I think I'm done. Let's see who's here. Hey everybody. I can see you. You can see me. Welcome to the G Spot Live. Let's talk a little bit today. Anyone who was here last week who can remember the 5 key areas that I talked about in my broadcast, that filters, some of the filters that we have. If you can place them in the chat right now, I will offer you a reading today. So I want to see who can remember, who can retain what I shared from last week. All right. This morning, I've been posting about generational wealth. It's my intention today to talk to you a little bit more about it. What I found very interesting as I have been doing my studies, my research, is that, you know, there are not a lot of traceable sources who specifically speak to generational wealth. There's a lot of mindset. There's a lot of inspiration. There's a lot of that. But when you put in hashtag generational wealth, you do not get a whole lot of resources, which tells me that those who have it don't talk about it, and those who want it don't necessarily have a formula that they have written down yet, which is perfectly okay, because what I've been learning more as I participate in my own pay myself first plan is that this starts so deeply within, especially when you don't have any external references when it comes to money, wealth, and abundance. When you don't have external references, or your family doesn't talk about them, and what I specifically mean by external references, I'm talking about a family member that owns a business that they can, that is a model for you. Does any one of you who are watching, do you have family members who own a business? For instance, both my mother and my father were employees. My grandparents were sharecroppers. I actually do not know a whole lot about what on my father's side what they did, but I do know enough to put two and two together to see that they were farmers. And so they probably were sharecroppers and freed men and women who actually owned their land. And a lot of times when we start talking about generations amongst black people in particular, I can't speak for any Latinas who may be watching. If you're a Latina and you're watching, I want you to share a little bit more about your culture here. There are some of our Latina sisters who watch. Shout out to Lillian, shout out to Araceli, shout out to Samara and Tamara, and you all are by no means any token goddesses in this community. You all are absolutely my family, and so that's why I'm calling your names. But when we start talking about women, when we start talking about our magic, a lot of times when it comes to our magic, we have auctioned off our magic because of our relationship to the auction block. Many of us have had a relationship subconsciously only at the point of entry to the pain story when it comes to our generational experience. And so when we start talking about our magic, particularly as women, particularly as goddesses who are growing forth, or if you don't know what goddess means and you're watching, but you are growing forth in goddess nonetheless, when we start to talk about magic, right, you can't talk about magic and think that magic is only sparkles and bubbles and only the good things. Because the truth of the matter is we are working our magic at all times, even if we are working our magic against ourselves. And that's why last week I talked about those filters, because those filters live with you. When you start this journey of personal development and healing, one of the myths and the misnomers is even when you don't talk about your story that much, or when you're further away from the experience, when you're no longer in pain, when you've done the forgiveness, when you are not walking around with the triggers, the truth of the matter is those things are still a part of you. When we study psychology, particularly the science of addiction in psychology, first of all, religion is the most addictive agent in the mind than the worst chemical or substance that man or woman is addicted to. Religion is the most addictive. So therefore, religion usually is not something that we question, right? And so we walk around as religious addicts with these concepts that we are not worthy, we can't question, on top of whatever other experiences that we've had. So now you add that to those of us who I got something in my eye, who relate to the post-traumatic slave story. And if you know anything about history, I went to school just like you all and was taught that we were brought here from Africa, or that we were mixed and that type of thing, until and I mean for years, even for years, in wearing the Nation of Islam uniform, fighting for my people, all of that stuff, right? I believe too that we were brought here from Africa. And it's so funny because it sets up a contradiction in our mind, because when we start to relate to the ancestors, we only relate to them probably back to the auction block unless you do DNA testing. Let me say something about those DNA tests. You have to be very careful about the corporation that owns the DNA testing, because if you do your research, you'll find out that many of them are skewing the results of the DNA test. And so they're telling you what they want you to know and to hear. And that's very deliberate, because when you actually know your lineage, you can stake financial claims. When you know your lineage, this is study the woman who is the leader of the Washita Nation, who did her research all the way to the Louisiana Purchase. The Louisiana Purchase is, and I don't know how I'm getting into history, but let me go on and get there because it has everything to do with generations. I didn't know this. It wasn't taught in school. These are things that we have to study even when we're looking to heal ourselves and be empowered and to empower our children and all of these great things. I didn't know that the Louisiana Purchase extended far beyond Louisiana. It wasn't Louisiana. These territories that we now see divided were not divided the way that they are today. And it will blow your mind. And my husband actually went into, I'll see if I can get to him or call him and ask him so you can go and look at it for yourself. He has pictures of how the land really was divided. Like the things that we're calling other countries was once a part of the land masses that we're now calling Texas and we're calling Mississippi. They were considered, these things were divided up as other countries. And so when we start to understand that, then we have a different relationship with ourselves, and you can actually stake claims on it. Now, is it a process? Yes, it's a process, but so is generational wealth. And so many of you, a part of being magical, many of you who are activating this feminine part of your journey that for me starts with the sensual and the liberation around these things that we have held on to that no longer serve us, that it wasn't serving our mother, it wasn't serving our father. And we're the ones who showed up and started asking some questions first about ourselves. Why do I feel this way? Why do I don't, how can I get to this next level? How can I not pass this on to my children? Where did this come from? Whatever the question is that started, the answer to the question lives in the same room with you every day. It goes to the bathroom with you. It gets up with you. The answer to that question is you. And many of us are the ones. We are the ones who were intended to interrupt the pattern of dysfunction and pathology on every level of even the not just the mental and the emotional, but especially the financial. But you can't get there if we don't have the context of where we are. You will continue to use traditional ways to do non-traditional things because the traditional way a lot of times do not have solutions for us. And the traditional ways that we continue to do everything, love, marriage, the traditional ways that we do sex, the traditional ways that we do money, those things keep us in a cycle. And I will say, I definitely feel confident that I have found some real lasting remedies as it relates to business, as it relates to love, sex, and money. I'm not just making that up. One thing that I learned last year, because I'm a Gemini, so I think that I can do a lot of things fast. And this is where your chart comes into play. This is where knowing not just because when I talk about lineage, I am talking about starting with your family line, but all of us belong to a cosmic family. And that cosmic family starts with knowing your chart. Now listen, if you're listening to this and you're saying I'm so deep, great, but get past that. This is the time. This is a mastery year. This is a number 11 year. And so it is time for those of us who have been on baby food to start taking in some new food. It's time for us to start eating some new food when it comes to our nourishment, mind, body, and spirit. And so what I learned last year is I have some remedies. I have remedies that I wanted to package and share with some of you around business, some of you, the new entrepreneurs, some of the ways that nobody showed me. And so I wanted to get certain things done by certain times because I know that the slave mind, the employee mind, and all of those 5 filters that I mentioned, it needs proof for you to really believe. A lot of times you all are not attracted to certain things unless you think they have it. And so or show it in some kind of way. And so what I learned, as coming back into the country, and having access to information and certain things that I did get exposed to, and time to digest it all, because I wasn't on this hustle in the United States. I had time to process. Is when it comes to generational wealth, when it comes to generational healing, when it comes to shifting generational muck and mire in our psychology, it takes time. It does take time. You who are watching, you can have a quantum leap. You can have a quantum leap. A Course in Miracles says that the miracle happens with the shift in perception. So the moment that you have a shift in perception, that is the miracle. The moment, and that means that the miracle can happen every day and every hour if you're committed to a life of changing your perception. Now that's a good lead in. Thank you, Holy Spirit. I said, for those of you who are watching, how many of you can name the 5 filters that I talk about that influence everything when it comes to our magic? How many of you can name the 5 filters? I've been waiting since I started talking. So I'm going to give a jump start for those of you who may have forgotten. I'm going to give a jump start. I'm going to give one. So let's take, for instance, not important. I'm going to work with that one, and then I'll wait for you to put the other 4 in, and I want to offer you a reading. And I'll go over the filters again. I'm going to give you maybe about 3 minutes because I know that there's a Facebook delay. So listen, when it comes to our perception, the shifting our perception, when the Course in Miracles says that the shift in perception, that's what creates the miracle. That's what creates the holy atonement, the at-one-ment, the point where we are aligned with ourselves and our spirits to manifest what it is that we say we're about having in our lives. So when it comes to these filters, they shape our perception. Now, where did you get it? My question to you is, what are you leaving? And it doesn't matter if you're 30 years old and you haven't thought about what you're leaving to your children. Some people think, well, I don't have any children, so I don't have to worry about leaving anything. And that's not true. And that's a part of the perception of this individualistic culture that we have been conditioned to believe. I got mine, you get yours. It's all about me. And, let me just take care of this. Let me just focus on this. And sometimes you have to do that in order to accomplish your vision. But even if you are entrusting the money that you create into something, have you learned about trust? Have you learned about your own individual status? Because when we start talking about these DNA tests, when I tell you that they have access, and I was referring to the Louisiana Purchase and the woman, I'm being general intentionally, so that if you want to study it, you can. The woman who is the queen mother of the Washita Nation, the way that she got her land rights back was because of her bloodline, because she knew who she was. And so it gave her access through documentation about who she is. But many of us don't want to deal with that. And so we don't have a relationship with our bloodline. And so my question to you is, what have you inherited? How many of you are in a family where there is an inheritance of a trust, of land, and I'm not just talking, or when I say trust, I mean a trust fund that relates to money. How many of you have inherited a trust fund? How many of you have had money set aside so that your children or you could go to college without having to apply for student loans? How many of you inherited something? I know I didn't. I did not. Now, I did not inherit a trust. I did not inherit land. I did not inherit a business. But what I did inherit was those 5 filters. I inherited those 5 filters that I talked about last week. I want to let that sink in, because some of you identified with those 5 filters. No matter what your accomplishments are in the world, it's the part of you that nobody can see that drives you to get it done, that drives you to show up, or sometimes drives you away. Fight or flight is still being driven. Jealousy and envy is still can be driven. And that's what I'm saying. Those 5 filters affect our magic. And my question to you, and I'm waiting for you all to respond. If you did not inherit anything from your family member, from an ancestor, a dead relative who left you and your family in a position where work was an option, or when you went to school, you didn't have to apply for loans. Y'all quiet up in here today. Y'all raising up my temperature because you making me teach hard. This is really supposed to be a conversation. I'm asking a question. How many of you inherited something? And I guess that means nothing if you have not responded. Now in hindsight, I will say that the one thing that we did inherit that I didn't know about initially, I didn't realize that it was a part of the inheritance. My grandmother did leave a house to my mother. And she did that because she had an unexpected death. So my mother was the natural heir. However, my family has had farmland and such. I have no idea where the status of that is. So a part of last year for me has been that kind of focus to get my documentation and my paperwork in order so that I can make these claims. Now, one of the reasons I have been teaching so hard and so deliberate in to meet women where we are is because many of us are so afraid and we're still functioning on those 5 filters. So when we hear about magic, we only hear about the or think about the magic that we may have seen in what is that lady's name? I believe in Jeannie, or what is her name? Jeannie, who twinkled her nose. That's magic to us. And magic is, sprinkling fairy dust. And although I believe that many women who work with me are the unicorns in their family, I call you butterflies, but many of you are the unicorns in your family. That's okay. And some of you may have felt like the black sheep, but you really are a unicorn. But the reason why is because many of you, somebody prayed for you. Somebody prayed for you to be the one to ask these questions. And so our magic gets interrupted because of our mindset, because of those 5 filters. So nobody responded to the 5 filters. That means that that there's no one who wants to get a reading. I gave you a jump start, which is not important, not worthy, not good enough, not enough, and worthless. Okay, and I explain each one of those. Those are basic ones. Of course, I'm simplifying. So my intention as a professional, as a psychology professional, is that that I'm not oversimplifying the different variations of how these things show up, what influences them, and how our coping mechanisms show up. So I'm not oversimplifying that, right? We're not doing therapy here. We're looking at some of the basics because they're still living in us no matter how much we have or how much we don't have. They're in us. And those are the things that can shift us when it comes to our feminine magic, which I'm calling this year she magic. And when it comes to money, there's a direct relationship to what I have also discovered as money curses. So sometimes those filters are feeding what we feel like we can't get from under. That's what a curse sometimes feel like. You wonder, like, where is this coming from? Now, as a metaphysician, Iyanla was chagrined as she heard me say, and some of my teachers would say like, oh, well, we don't really believe in curses, right? Just like we don't believe in a devil under the ground. Some of you still believe that there's a devil that is busy and out to get you, but really the devil is just the ego mind, easing God out. The devil is the part that separates you from all things that are love. And so when it comes to us working with our magic, right, in money magic, what I discovered is those 5 filters will creep up when you're moving forward. When you start to set on a course, those 5 filters will show up. But where did they come from? Is that a part of the inheritance that we received? Because if it's a part of the inheritance, then you have to be able to shift and reverse the curse. You have to be able to reverse the curse. We call them, as metaphysicians, generational patterns instead of curses, because we all walk under generational patterns that show up in how we choose our husbands and wives, and how we show up when it comes to our physicality. How is it that we show up when we handle money, when we communicate? Because when it comes to a woman, I want you to hear this. You are always connected to the mother. Not just your mother who you were born from, even if you are adopted. There are people in this group who were adopted. They do not know who their mother is. But I can tell you one thing for sure and two things for certain. Your DNA takes over no matter whether you know them or not. And there are little things that we find ourselves doing and responding to. And you say, well, I don't know why. And you think you're so unique. But really, have you all ever heard, how many of you have heard that we are all ancestors returned? How many of you have heard that? Y'all ain't talking to me today. Y'all normally say hello. So and forgive me if it's Facebook being the culprit and not doing doing the signal right, doing any justice to the signal. Forgive me if I don't see. It's totally possible. So if you're saying something and I'm not responding to you, it's because I don't see any comments in the comment section. So one of the things that we're going to do in the coaching clinic for this very first month, remember we're doing 4 months of She Magic Money. The first month is we're going to look at how we can take these filters and start to reverse some of the curses that we are walking in relationship to our money. Because we now, and sometimes, like I'm gonna give you an example. There was one time I remember when I was an employee and I was just not happy. First of all, I knew for years before I left my job that I was called. I had really already answered the call, and I just was. Security is my addiction. I can be very addicted to security. And it's in my astrological chart. I have 4 planets. Yeah, 4 planets in Taurus, maybe 5. So if you know anything about the planet, about the energy of Taurus, Taurus loves security. It loves comfort. And so when you're talking to a Taurus, they hear through those filters. Even your astrological chart. If you haven't had a reading with me, I'm offering them this month for 11/11. Okay? Well, and I might do it for the rest of the year because of this being an 11 vibrational year, a master year. And I'm going to do something real special for everybody who's ever had a chart reading with me, because remember, Capricorn is in Saturn. It is about us getting our business in order. So it doesn't matter what your sign is, but it does matter where your sign shows up in Capricorn, or what your relationship is to Saturn, because it's about getting your business in order. And let me tell you, I was not one who was born talking about business. I was born anointed and called and all of that thing. My mindset, my spirit is that of a minister, that of a humanitarian. It was of a teacher. It has been that before I had a name for it, before I could put a label on it. And so it's taken me a lot, even as an entrepreneur, because I started off giving myself away, just like many ministers, many teachers who are devalued in this culture, right? These are the people who probably should be, and I'm not talking about mega church ministers. I'm talking about, when I think of myself, I think of myself in the line of priests and medicine women who were the village, who kept the village together, right? I know that that's what I come from because of what knowing of the history of my grandmother, my grandparents, and that type of thing. And so what I'm saying is that many of us, when we are relating to our money, we make judgments about ourselves. When it comes to our business, many of us are predispositioned one way, so we have to unlearn that and then shift ourselves through the growth, the intentionality, the deliberate action, the consistent things that we have to teach ourselves to do that don't come natural. So even though I get in front of you and I offer these programs, trust and believe it's a stretch for me. My vision is to one day not to be on social media, to have a life such that I'm not necessarily engaging at this level. My vision is to have a farm and to have places for people to come and to retreat. It's fresh. It's a fresh vision. I didn't know that it would go like this. But what happens is when you start to activate your feminine magic, the path will unfold as you walk it. Some of you are waiting for this to trigger that, and you're the trigger. And what happens is we live based on these other false triggers that are inside of us that are our filters, and those become the curses. They operate like a curse. They really are a generational pattern. And those generational patterns cannot let information even get in, because a lot of times we don't believe it. We don't believe that it's true. We don't believe that it's possible. Let me see something here. Somebody sent me a message. I was just making sure that you all could see me because I'm getting messages and I can't see what it is, but anyway. So when it comes to that, and there are many ways, and so I'm going to invite guests into the coaching clinic. We're going to deal with these generational patterns in this first coaching clinic. You can join the coaching clinic at bit.ly/SheMagic and choose from one of the 3 payment options. And those of you who are enrolling in the Juicy You, I will be giving you some bonuses around the She Magic. So remember, the Juicy You this month is the money edition. So in addition to being able to attend the She Magic, you also will get some other support bonuses from me for those of you who are enrolled in the Juicy You. And so if the Juicy You is going to be lit this year, because this is the money edition. I'm so clear about what it is that we're going to do and how we're going to do it and how we're going to leverage it. I encourage you, even if you have already experienced the Juicy You, to come in this time, because we're gonna amplify that She Magic that we're working with. Because a lot of times when it comes to I sat for years. When it comes to listening to something, we can't hear it because of the filters. And I want to speak to that person, right? Because I was that person. I was the person who would hear certain things about how to invest money, how to do certain things. And what I would look at is, well, I don't have it now. And so therefore it doesn't apply to me. I got to try to get it before I can qualify to make investments or even envision having property. And so I want to talk into the spirit of those of you who absolutely you have more than you know. You have so much on the inside of you that simply needs to be activated by the mindset, by the willingness. And I'm telling you, a lot of times when coaches and certain business people, they'll tell you, come here, do that, but inside, I want to talk to those of you who are inside. You say, yeah, but not now, later. Let me figure this out. And so I always say to feminine women, we don't figure out, we figure in. And what happened, I'm telling you, I had the luxury once of being mentored in a wealth seminar by a brother who did very well for himself, and he happened to work at one of the major banks. And so one of my girlfriends, she just is a natural investor. She was just really good with making sound decisions with money. She got out of college. She bought a house instead of renting an apartment. She got roommates, so she was able to stack her money. She worked for the federal government, so she had a thrift savings plan. And so she was able to always have access to money and to savings. And so she was encouraging all of the women who were around us get your shit together, get it together, get your business in order. At least look at this, try this, start here, do that. And so we went to this wealth seminar, and this guy he was saying some different things. And one thing that stuck with me, no matter how active my filters might have been about what I was able to do, at that time I went in ready. I think I was ready to buy a house or something like that. It was something in my life that I was ready to cross the line and do. And one of the things he said, I know a lot of you think that you need to rush out and buy a house. He said, but that's not the only way to make money. He said, he talked about stocks. And he talked about, for instance, Susie Orman. He said, Susie Orman, he said, many of people when they must not hear her when she says she rented her condo for years because the path that she chose to invest was in her stocks and bond. And that shifted me in that moment, because at that time, I think I was a renter and I had a judgment about myself because I know who I was and all this stuff, and I'm metaphysically inclined and all these things, and I'm a minister, and I still had judgments about myself because I felt like I should have more. Come on now, am I the only one that feels like that says that to myself? You're 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, and you start saying, I should have more. I was young. I don't even think I was 40 yet, and I think I said, I should have more. And he said, stop judging yourself. He said there's many ways for you to invest your money. He said it's not always, he said, buying property. He said, do you know, in the Washington, D.C. area, in Virginia and Maryland, he said many of these people are house poor. They have the big old house out there in Mitchellville, and yes, they rank as the wealthiest in the country, but they are working just to pay the mortgage. And that is not wealth. That's not wealth. And that is why many of us have a bill paying consciousness. And so that's why we make decisions. Well, let me get this bill out the way before I invest in myself. You don't see yourself as the first invoice. I am my first invoice. I am my first transaction. And that's where the pay yourself first process that we've activated in our tribe has been shifting people and their ability to attract residual income. And listen, I had been around pay yourself first for years. But what I understood was, and what I said to myself all year long, 2017, coming back and having to embrace my suddenly with being in the United States. Remember, I was able to live underneath my normal budget by living abroad. I was able to do amazing things, right? And then there was some things that were a stretch and a strain as well, because you don't have access to certain things. And so one of the things that I kept saying to myself is alignment with my assignment. I am in alignment with my assignment. So everything that I did had to line up with the assignment on my life. And when I stopped going for trying to just get the money, or going for just advertising and branding, when I stopped trying to be everywhere and do everything, but be in alignment with my assignment, I'm telling you, I started to have shifts. I started to hear the things that had already been around me. And so I'm saying to you, those 5 filters, go back and watch the video and be honest with yourself. What is your filter? And if you say, well, I got 2 or 3 of those filters, I guarantee you have a core filter that set off the inner conversation. And that sometimes is what keeps us from being able to hear good word, good guidance, or invitations to go to the next level, because we think that we have to do it in one way. And the whole thing about being a magical woman is there are many ways, but for every woman who is activating her she magic, for every woman, you can start right where you are. And my mother used to tell me this. I said this on the call. If you were on the generational wealth call with Cecile, this week. Shout out to Cecile, who brought her tribe of mothers in to have a new conversation with them. And it brings tears to my eyes, because I'm telling you, sisters, you cannot get away from that embryonic relationship with your mother, your mother's mother, her mother, her mother, her mother, and her mother, and her mother. And that is why when you come into the Juicy You, it's a starting point for you to make peace with the things that have been laid upon women through guilt and shame. I couldn't hear my mother. My mother said to me, baby, I don't care how much money you make. If you just got a little money, take that $5 and just she said, just put it to the side. Put it in a sock. Now, of course, my mother had me with bank accounts when I was very little, very young. So when I went to work, I didn't have to go try to scramble to open a bank account. I had a bank account. I knew how to write checks. My mother used to make me sit down and write checks and write out the bills. I'm not saying and recommending that you do that. But when I look back over what I didn't like and what I felt like was punishment, I see that my mom was conditioning me. So she was teaching me, pay yourself first. She said to me, baby, put your money to the side. Have something for yourself. And I got married at 19. And she told me, she said, have you some mad money, baby. She said, don't always have your money mixed in. Now listen, let me tell you something, and then I'm gonna close out. Some of you who are in different traditions can respect this. I got a reading once, right? And in the reading, the ancestors came through in the reading and said, you are never to mix your money with another man that comes into your life. Now, that's my reading and my Odu. That's not necessarily applies to every woman. I'm not but listen, look at the DNA speaking. My mother was telling me the same thing. She was giving me a formula. Because you know, if you've ever been divorced, if you've ever owned property, what it takes whether you let it go, whether you lose it, whether the court makes you split it in half, it can be devastating to your finances and takes years for you to build up again. Well, I went through a divorce similar to that, that really I had to recalibrate and rebuild in order for me to be free. Not free from him, but free in my mind, my body, my spirit, and most of all, my womb. So listen, I'm telling you, there's something you have been around all along as well. But the filters will keep you from being able to tap into this to hear what it is generationally. So if you came in at the end, I do want you to look. It's time for us to start asking our family members some questions. If you have elders that are over 60, what is the condition of their affairs? Do you know what to do if something happens to an elder that you are responsible for? Do your siblings know who is going to run point if something happens and there's a health issue? Do you have a living will? Do you have a will that after someone passes on? Do you have these conversations? Notice, you don't have to go in like a radical, probably like I did years ago, and force the conversation, but notice it. Notice if your family gets uncomfortable when you're talking about money. I guarantee you there's shame there, but they're not necessarily, not them, but it's in the bloodline. And so a lot of times what I discovered and what I've been paying attention to in my own game of life in the last couple of years is sometimes we cannot hear the next level that we're being called to because of these filters. And so what I agreed to do with my spiritual committee is to support women to get there, to be the bridge, to get us to across. And I want to take you all with me. Listen, Sabira called me. Those of you all who know Reverend Sabira, Minister Sabira, Sensei Sabira, y'all call her Sensei Sabira. I call her Reverend Sabira. We were ordained. She was ordained in the same line with me. Well, not technically in the same line. But for you all's listening, in the same line. She said, LaTanya, do you know the progress that you have made? You know that you're a director in this organization right now. And I'm like, no. Because my goal was not to be a director. My goal was to be in alignment with my assignment. I had to do thus saith the Lord, the law of life, on me. So when I show up with my heart. People say don't wear your heart on your sleeve. But once again, my Odu told me I have to walk on this land with my heart on my sleeve. I have to walk on this land that way. And there I could get into more. This is why some of you, I'm helping you build your altars. We're going to build some altars in this money magic, probably in the second, because it's all a part of the formula of breaking certain things down so that we can build the next thing up. So listen, I hope you've enjoyed chatting with me today. I can't see any of your comments. I really can't see everybody who's going in and out. Thank God that the broadcast still hung on today. I have a vision for my technology, but I like being casual enough to come in, but I would like to start broadcasting on Periscope as well. So if we have any people who have video, your video technological and inclined around that, holla at your girl. Let's build this team. Let us all rebirth and emerge, transform. Sign up for the She Magic Money Clinic that's coming up this month, the third Thursday of every month. Thank you to my sisters who are joining. Shout out to my Soul Wealth sister. I see that she's joined today. Whoa, you got it. I know that she's busy. She's a busy woman, but shout out to my big sister, Dr. Elder Vicki Johnson of Soul Wealth, who absolutely has been a part of me, saying let's get ourselves together. Shout out to the Succulent Success team, who is paying their self first. Holler at the Juicy Butterflies who's showing up for support. I could just go on, and all of you who are starting the journey. And if you haven't experienced 30 days living in your sweet spot in the Juicy You, come on in this month and get the bonuses. I probably will run it twice. I'm not sure, but there's no time like the present. And did you all see the article that I posted from Iyanla, who says that the beginning of the year really is spring. So now is the time for us to go in and do this magic. And I've been telling y'all that, but I just wanted to put a little proof out there for you that this is the season really for us to go within as women. And there's a reason for the woman to use this. So because her new year is spring. So come into the Juicy You. It's 30 days living in your sweet spot. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. I look forward to seeing you on the other side. I'll join you in the comments from my laptop. Have a good day, everyone.